All right, next up for our PPP loan series, we're going to talk about PPP forgiveness and the terms. First off, let me introduce myself. My name is Vaughn Long. I am an enrolled agent here in the Richmond, Virginia area and own a tax business and consulting business. So we've been studying this in a lot of depth, and everybody really wants to see these PPP loans forgiven. But I think you've got to be really careful about following the rules because I do not think it's going to be that easy. Number one, since you're making the PPP, I don't think I mentioned this in the high level, these applications for PPPs are through banks. And it's the banks who are going to be reviewing you for forgiveness. I'm going to call it like an audit. They're going to audit how you use the funds. So make sure you're following the rules and terms for that audit correctly. Number one, you can apply for this loan up to June 30 of 2020, but that has no bearing on when you use the funds. You'll use the funds over an 8-week period that starts with your loan origination date, and that's once you're approved and signed the documentation. So that 8-week period is the only time you can spend the funds and qualify for forgiveness, and that's what we understand today. What is covered by this? Well, let's define compensation because that's going to be the majority of this. That's wages, commissions, salary, or something similar with a max $100,000 annual salary limit for any one employee, cash tips or equivalent, vacation, parental, family, medical, or sick leave, group health care benefits, that includes premiums, retirement benefits, and this last part, state or local tax assessed on compensation. Now, what they don't list in there are federal taxes, so that's really thrown us for a loop right now, because does that mean none of the employees' taxes can be forgiven when you pay it on their behalf? Because that's part of gross payroll. Now, very recently, there was a footnote. Tony Nitti for Forbes.com wrote about this just last April 15th, the evening. And he found a footnote in the IRS FAQ that said you can calculate for forgiveness the employee's portion of their withholding taxes and the employee portion of their Social Security Medicare tax. And what's not going to be able to be forgiven is the employer, the small business owner's portion of the Social Security Medicare. So we're waiting for a little more guidance on that other than just in a footnote, as Tony said, in an IRS FAQ. But I think that's something you can plan on. What else can be forgiven? We've talked about the compensation and payroll, rent, utilities, and mortgage interest. Make sure you make a distinction between making your full mortgage payment and they're only going to allow forgiveness of mortgage interest. It's the mortgage principal you cannot pay with this and give forgiveness for it. Now, you can certainly use the money on your mortgage principal, but you'll have to pay that back under the terms of the loan. Now, how are they calculating this? This is a factor of 2.5 of your average monthly payroll. Now, it can be up a different calculation and max out, but for most small businesses, this is what you're going to fall back on. Your 2019 average monthly payroll times a factor of 2.5. Now, if you do the math and get into the weeds on this, 2.5 comes to 10 weeks. But we talked earlier about an 8-week allowable window. So what they're intending with this is the 2.0 factor of 2.5 is 8 weeks. That's the money for payroll. And that extra half factor of 2.5 will go towards the rent, utilities, and mortgage interest. So that's how that math breaks out. You also have to use your funds for a minimum of 75% of payroll to qualify for forgiveness. Please watch that. And you need to match to your average full-time employee count that you track along the way. Now, there's been some questions along the way of how you're going to calculate that from the past and who comes back. So that's much more than I can cover in one little video. But the intent is a minimum 75% of the funds for payroll and compensation, and you need to match up to your average FTE, your full-time employee count. Now, you can rehire someone that you furloughed or let go by June 30th of 2020. Last little bit, what are the terms? It's a 24-month loan period. It was talked at one point as 10 years. That has been cut from 10 years to 2. So 2 years or 24 months with a 6-month deferral. So your first payment, if it wasn't forgiven, will start 6 months after you receive the funds and has to be paid out over 18 months. And it's a 1% rate. Now, some last little tidbits. There's no collateral needed, no personal guarantee, no fees, no prepayment penalty. Thanks, everybody. I know that was a lot. We're going to talk about PPP and some advice of how to handle forgiveness next. Please check out localtogetherstronger.com because together we are stronger. and please support your local small business. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Be safe.